Okay, so honestly, I don't know anything about you. So your
Perfect
name,
interview.
what you do.
Yeah. So I'm Jared Scheppmann. I'm the executive director at Ekisa Ministries.
Ekisa.
Ekisa Ministries.
Okay.
So we work in Uganda,
Okay.
in a town called Jinja, which is where
I've been to Jinja.
where the Nile River begins.
Yeah.
Right. So we work in Jinja, Uganda,
Yeah.
and Ekisa works with children with special needs and disabilities.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Now these kids, are they from families? Is it like an orphanage then?
So we do a few different things.
Okay.
So kind of our overall goal is we want to improve the quality of life for children living with disabilities. That's why we exist.
Yeah.
And so the way we go about that is a few different ways. So we have a small children's home.
Okay.
We have 16 kids who live in our care full time, all with special needs, from mild to severe. And so we're a place where we can provide better, specialized medical care and therapy, and meet their developmental needs.
Yeah.
The other thing that we do, and the bigger thing that we do, is we work with children with disability and special needs in the community.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So how do you keep a family who has a child with disability
Yes.
together? Because you can imagine being in a developing country, right? Not having access to the support services we find in Western countries, the therapy, the medical assistance, the education, right? And you just think of the hopelessness that could bring a family, the isolation that it brings them into, right? And even on top of not having access to services and support, right?
Yeah.
Families are discriminated against. They're outcasted because there's amazing stigma that exists against persons with disability. They're cursed. They don't have a value.
Yeah.
So you get isolation. So we work with families, with the children, providing support services, social work.
Yeah.
2 families, 2 moms. A lot of single moms, right?
Okay. Yeah.
2 children, and our goal is keep the family together, strengthen the family. Prevent children from being abandoned, prevent a family from feeling like they can't do it.
Okay. So you guys, do you do like, so some of these kids, I'm assuming, come to you, or you find them, however, but actually have homes or actually have parents or a parent, and you guys work with reunifying them. What's that like?
Yeah, so if a kid were to come into our home, it could be because they were abandoned, left in a hospital, left on the side of a road, just totally abandoned. And so that family, may never be traceable to find them. Some we do find, some we do trace, and then we work with the families and counsel them, over a period of what could be years to prepare them and equip them to take their child back into the home.
Okay.
Other times, a child might be removed from a family because of neglect or abuse.
Okay.
And so we had that happen, with a family, and the mom was imprisoned. And so every month our social worker went and visited her in prison and counseled her and prepared her, and we got her a job when she was out. And a year later, she was able to take her daughter home.
Yeah.
And so for us, family is the answer. Family is God's design for this, not institutionalized care. But a lot of people think, well, because this child has special needs, they're going to have to live in a residential home.
Yeah.
We can't resettle this child with a family because their needs are too big.
Wow.
And for us, we say, no, it is possible.
So you've seen it and it's been successful. But how long have you been doing this? So, in other words, did they just come home last week and you're like, oh, it's working? Or have you seen it
we've seen
over a span of time?
Yeah, so Ekisa's been working since 2011.
Okay.
And we've had 40 kids who've lived in our home since 2011.
Okay.
And of the 40, we've had 17 who've either been resettled with family or placed into foster or adoptive care.
Okay.
And so family permanence is what we're shooting for. And so, and sometimes it takes a long time.
Yeah.
We've had resettlements back to family that have taken 4 or 5 years.
Whoa.
Just because at first the family feels like, no, I can't do it. I don't want that child. And so through that process of counseling them and discipling them and teaching them about God's design for family and teaching them about the value that's inherent, right? The Imago Dei, like we teach families about this so that they have a willingness, right? And then we prepare them to physically care for their child and meet their needs. And so we have successful resettlements, and it is possible, and it's possible for any organization, not just one that specializes in children with special needs.
I mean, you mentioned a little bit earlier that some of these kids are looked at as either cursed or whatever else because of their disabilities. I mean, so you probably have so many things that, so many obstacles. Like for the child, for the parents.
Yes.
Just talk about the realistic struggles of day to day doing what you do.
Yeah, lots of obstacles. That's true. But they're all overcomable. And some take longer than others. But so when we talk about a family, the first thing is that willingness. Do they see the child as a part of their family? Do they see the child as valuable, or do they just see the child as a burden because they have additional needs? And a lot of it comes from parents have never been educated on what they need to know about their child, right? So on one hand, you have stigma and kind of false assumptions and beliefs that the child's cursed, or it's not like the parents, we sinned against God and God's punishing us, and so you can have those false beliefs, which you can overcome by teaching people about God's value and His design and a theology of suffering, right? And on the other side, families have never gotten a real diagnosis of what's actually wrong with their kid, and treatment options, and managing and behavior management, and how we help this child develop from where they're at. And so coming alongside parents and providing, not just that foundational base to build off of, but the practical of, hey, here's what the future looks like for your child, and here's some things that you can do to help them develop and to grow, and teaching them that, like, no matter how far they get, right, no matter how far they go in school, no matter what they're able to physically do with their hands and their feet, like at the end of the day, like this child has value because God gave them value.
Wow. So have you seen, because this is, when you're talking about children with, special needs, it's like a lifetime commitment, right?
Yeah.
And so you've seen parents embrace that and go, no, I value my child, or this child that I will take to be mine, and I know is a lifetime commitment.
Right.
But you've actually seen them take on that mindset.
Yeah, we have. And for us as an organization, we can resettle a child back into a home, right? Like we can prepare the parent, teach them about how to care for this child, right? But at the end of the day, there's still a gap between, what that child needs to thrive, right? The therapy, the medical assistance, those kind of things. And so as an organization, we come alongside families and provide that wraparound care, that support that a child needs.
Yeah. Now, okay, there's hope for some of them that they could actually live outside of the home one day, because you said there's varying degrees of the disability. I don't know anything about, like, here in Africa, like, I know in the US sometimes there's like certain organizations that will take people in and give them jobs, specifically because they see some of these disabilities that they have. Is there anything like that?
There's few.
Okay.
And the hard thing is that we still have this stigma against persons with disabilities, right? And that's a big problem. How do we change this for the whole country, right? But somebody told me just the other day that there's a company in our town in Jinja that makes matches. Okay. And somebody told me, hey, those guys hire persons with disability. Awesome. And I thought, man, like, how cool is that? And like, change, right? Like, those people get it. Those people obviously see that this person has value and needs a future, needs something to do. And so, and we work on vocational skills and daily living skills, with our kids, so that they can have something to do in the future. But at the end of the day, it is a lifelong commitment, and that's just, it's the situation that we're in, and it's the reality that people face, and we just have to adapt and be strong and find that support system, find that community to help us through that long run.
Yeah. Now you're sharing how, like, before, how you used to be a pastor. Like, how does your role as a pastor, your faith in God? How does that play into all of this?
Oh, it's so important, you know, because when we look at this problem of stigma, when we look at this problem of someone believing this child has no worth, right? You know, they'll never finish, you know, their schooling, right? They can't help around the house, you know, they can't help us, you know, dig in the garden, you know, and so you can look at it and say, what value does this child have to the family? Mm-hmm. And for us, there's only one answer to that, right? Mm-hmm. It's the value that God gave them, right? Yeah. The Creator determines the value. Yeah. You know, I can paint a painting. Yeah. And I can say, you know what, this painting's worth $1 million, and I'm not going to sell it for anything less than $1 million because it's that valuable to me. Yeah. And God is what He's done with us, right? Yeah. And that child, God has given the same value as you and me and the king and the president. Yeah. You know, the same as anyone else. And so for us, like, that's the only answer to that problem. Wow. So
that's good. So you made not just a switch from the U.S. to here, but also a complete change of like profession. You know, I mean, from being like a pastor of a church to saying, I'm going to work with these specific children
with disability. Yeah.
How did that happen?
We had moved to Uganda. We'd come to Uganda on a few short-term trips and left the church world, and you know, God opened all the doors, and it was very clear, like, we're going to Uganda. Wow. And we were working for another children's home, and about a month before we moved there was a child who had been admitted into the home, who was about 3 years old and had severe special needs. And right away, like, you know, I remember walking down the hallway one day and seeing the kid sitting on the floor and knowing like something's wrong, right? And so we got to know that child over the years. My wife began working with him. He was deaf, he had epilepsy, he had intellectual disability and delay, mental disability. And so my wife started working with this kid every day, trying to teach him how to sign, trying to teach him more, trying to give him a voice, right? A way to communicate. And we just grew a heart, and God just, you know, planted something, and we just were drawn in to this boy. And so, you know, after months and months, we decided, hey, we want this boy to come live with us. And so we fostered him for a year. And he eventually got adopted to a family in the States, and he's growing and thriving and, you know, improving in his development. You know, but he was our pull into the special needs world. Yeah. And it's because of that boy that, you know, we started to learn, okay, what exists in Uganda for him? Yeah. As we started as foster parents to look at what services can we get for our boy, right? And seeing there's not very much, you know, and what there is almost unattainable for most families.
Really?
You know, and
is it because of a cost or location? Or
all of it. Cost, location. You know, you think most families, like in countries like Uganda, live on, you know, $1.50 a day, right? Yeah. So to put out, you know, some change to get some transport, you know, to take the bus over to get therapy, like, isn't even possible. Mm-hmm. Even if the therapy is free. Yeah. You know, and so there's lots of barriers for families to overcome, and because of our boy, you know, we found out about what organizations did exist, and Ekisa was one of those, and we continued to kind of follow Ekisa, and eventually I ended up here at Ekisa.
Wow. So now that you've been working here and doing this specific ministry, you know, because I'm used to the institution. I'm used to, like, let's just get a bunch of kids here, let's get a bunch of workers there, and there's this shift, you know, that everyone's talking about now. Gosh, that's not the best. We want to get them into homes. Like, that was God's intention. There's something about a mother, father, this or that. Like, I know you're working towards that, but are you seeing resistance? Like, what's that experience been?
I think, you know, the change is amazing, right? And like you said, like, family is God's design, right? Yes, and when you that breaks down and you're left with these other options, right, of institutionalized care and what, it's like, you know, these aren't the plan B. It's not a little bit, you know, it's much worse, right? And so we're saying, okay, this is worse. We've got to get children into families, right? So we're doing it. Like, that shift is happening now, right? There's people trailblazing that, but what I see is that a lot of people are not equipped to handle a child with disability, a child with special needs, right? You know, an institution, a children's home, an orphanage, you know, they would say like, well, we don't know how to care for this kid, right? Yeah. And they have to, because it's a percentage of the population, you know? And, you know, then they'd say, well, this child's always gonna live here because they have severe needs, right? Severe medical needs, severe developmental needs. And at the end of the day, like, even though, you know, I as an organization, right, with US dollars can provide, you know, better medical care, better diet, better education to this kid, right? Like, I can do that, right? Yeah. I can't provide a family.
Wow.
You know? And so at the end of the day, no matter, even if I can do it better, the child belongs in a family. Yeah. And if the child's gonna be in a family, and that's what I care about, right? Yeah. Now I have to come alongside that family and provide those things that they're missing out on, you know? Yeah. So it's one thing to resettle the child, to reintegrate them into family, but as organizations, we have to shift and be like, okay, well, we got the kids out of the children's home. Yeah. You know, so now what are we going to do? What's our work going to be? How are we going to, you know, use these donations? How are we going to use our staff, right? Yeah. Well, that's the answer. We have to come alongside these other vulnerable populations and say, hey, let's provide support services now rather than institutionalized care. Let's work on, you know, instead of having babies, you know, abandoned because the mother died at birth, let's focus on prenatal care, you know, for moms so that we solve these problems, you know. You know, I talk about this, the Band-Aid and the cure, right? When we talk about development work, we can come in and I can provide a bed and a home and a safe place for a child who's abandoned, but how do I stop children from being abandoned in the first place? How do I strengthen a family so that a mother doesn't come to my gate and say, I can't do this, will you take my child and care for them? No. Let me come alongside you, let me walk with you, let me show you that it's possible. Let me help you with the therapy, let me help you with the additional medical expenses you have.
Yeah. So have you seen that, like, there actually are a lot of parents who want to care for their kid, but just got overwhelmed and they just needed some support. Yeah. And then I'm sure there's others that are just like, I'm done.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so you do
and
see the ones
we have both those. Like when we work with families in our community, we see both those, right? Okay. And so with working with children with special needs, you know, working in a social work setting, everything's individualized, right? Okay. You have to meet people where they're at. Yeah. You know, and so when we talk about a family, I have families who are like, man, I love my kid, I want to provide for my kid, and I don't have the means to do it, right? Yeah. And that's a great starting point for us, because it's like, hey, that's an easy problem, right? Yeah. And you have the other ones, right, who haven't changed their mindset of the value of the child, right? They buy into those false assumptions, and they haven't had the education, you know. And so as an organization, okay, let's meet you where you're at.
Some of it's just a heart issue.
It's a heart, it can be. It's a heart and
it's like in the U.S., you've got all these abortions because it's just a lot more convenient, right? Like, I can move on with my life. And so I would think with the special needs children that there are many people, that same heart issue is like, gosh, my life would be a lot easier without this kid. And so just like in an abortion, I'm not thinking about the baby.
Exactly.
You know, I could see how parents just justify this.
Because it's additional work, it's additional time, it's additional resources. And so, you know, it does put a physical, actual burden on a family, right?
Oh, of course.
It's undeniable.
It's complete life change.
Right, and so, and you can't walk through that alone, right? You know, to deal with that additional burden on your life, and it's just, it is like, this is the situation you are placed in. So are you gonna rise to the occasion, or are you gonna throw in the towel? Yeah. You know, and the way that you rise to the occasion is in community. Right? When you're by yourself, man, I'm throwing in the towel. Like, I can't do this. But when you have a group of people walking with you, you know, not just an organization providing support, but neighbors in the church, and, you know, your family coming alongside you to help you.
And there's probably like a peace in those parents now that didn't exist when they were separated from their child. Because, you know, you hear stories of people that gave their kid up for adoption, and their whole life they just wonder, right? And so are you able to see that now with parents that kind of let go of their child, but they just didn't feel right completely? They just didn't know what, but now it's like, this is right. This is the way it was supposed to be.
There's always that piece, you know, even Even, if a parent were to, neglect or abuse their child, right? That's still your child. There's something inside of you that's never going to change that, never going to take that away. And that abuse and neglect came from a lot of circumstances, right? And a lot of bad choices, and not having the support that you needed, right? And you felt abandoned, you felt alone, and
So people that are going to listen to this, if there was one message you'd want to communicate, what would it be?
Oh man.
I know it's a tough one.
You got to do something now.
Yeah.
You got to do something now. We as the church, as the big church, right? We've come in trying to solve this crisis, right? And we've created a problem, right? And so now we're at this tipping point, right? And we know the way, we know the changes that we need to make, to resettle children with families, right? And it's like, we've got to do something, right? Because it's not plan B, right? We're causing harm to children being in institutionalized care. Yeah. So let's start now and let's fix it, because it's fixable, and let's put our dollars behind the right organizations. Let's put our dollars to things that are not just going to be that Band-Aid solution, but are going to solve the long-term problem. Organizations who are providing that long-term support and change so that families can stay together. We talk about reintegration, right? Yeah. And that's the first piece of the puzzle. Yeah. And the next piece is that strengthening families, empowering families. That's what we have to do as organizations, as the church. Yeah. Keep families together so that we don't get back into the same place. So do something. Find an organization, whether it's us, whether it's somebody else who's committed to the long-term family preservation, to children being in families, to changing the stigma that exists for children with disabilities. Because if we don't do that, we're just spinning our wheels.
It is such a crazy, amazing thing that you get to do. And I know that sometimes, a lot of what I do, I stand in front of a crowd, thousands of people, and it looks so great, but biblically, when I think about the value that you're fighting for and what you're teaching, I just see it as so biblical and probably so thankless, in comparison to other, Christian things you could be doing. So man, I just want to say it's very humbling to hear what you're saying and what you've devoted your life to.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
It's a good work. It's it's a work that has so many challenges, right, and obstacles, and in both the the practical of children with medical issues and those things, and then you deal with injustice, right, and you have all those things, but at the end of the day, I get to see a 5-year-old take his first steps. I get to see a child who doesn't have who can't speak, find a means of communication, and those little wins. It's just amazing, to see God at work, through us and changing
awesome,
a society, changing their future.
Yeah.
So.
Very, very cool.
Yeah.